How to build a more trusting relationship with your partner. That's the question we're pondering today on The Art of Lifing with Keka. About 13 years ago, I had the honor and privilege of working with this really inspirational Orthodox Jewish rabbi. His name is Rabbi Pomensky, and he is a marriage expert. So he travels to different places, he works with different individuals and couples and helps them to create happy, healthy marriages. And as we were working at DDB with his messages for his PR campaign, there was something that he had said once that kind of just really stood out to me because I couldn't make sense of it at first. He had said that, the most powerful part of a happy, healthy relationship is when you can completely give your trust into your partner. Now, when I heard him say those words, my first thought was, does that mean that you're asking me to open myself up and be completely vulnerable to the point that I'm allowing somebody to potentially hurt me? Because for me, my instinctive reaction was, I'm going to love and I'm going to give and I'll accept that love back. However, I need to always protect myself. So when I started to look back at my reaction to this, I started to wonder, why am I thinking this way? Why am I reacting in that sort of way in which this wisdom of learning to completely trust your partner doesn't fall with me in a way that feels authentic? I realized then that when I was growing up as a child, many of my childhood friends, people in our community, many of them were in relationships that weren't necessarily very healthy. And so there were instances where I saw people that were unhealthy, unhappy, they got hurt in a relationship. And so I would watch those things as a child and say, oh, look, that person did this and got hurt in a relationship. I need to make note of that and make sure that I don't ever get hurt like that. So ironically, I started to build walls and barriers around myself to protect myself, even though I had not experienced some of this personally myself. I'd seen it in other people and I picked up those lessons. And so I'm sharing this story with you because I think that when we look at cultivating a happy, healthy relationship with our partner or significant other or a loved one, there are factors at play that we don't necessarily see at first glance all the time. So these are the 4 questions that I asked myself when I went through this process of really trying to understand what Rabbi Pomensky was telling us, and I'm hoping that maybe it'll inspire you as well. So number 1, I started to really think about those childhood traumas or stressors that I saw around other people. And so I invite you to maybe consider taking an audit of where in your life, when you look back in the past, where have you experienced traumas or stressors? Where have you seen it in other people? What has caused you potentially unknowingly to build up certain boundaries or walls or protective barriers for yourself? Because when you bring that into a relationship, quite often your relationship itself doesn't require those boundaries, but those are things that we're importing, like the emotional baggage we're importing from other relationships or other experiences. And it's only when we can acknowledge those that we can actually break down those invisible walls and barriers so that we can have a much more open and communicative relationship. Number 2, I think often about the fact that when we see those traumas or stressors, or when we experience them, when we put up those walls, we start to create artificial rules for ourselves. Sometimes we do that for ourselves, but sometimes society gives that to us. So many young girls grow up watching fairy tales where the prince is going to deliver happiness to the princess's life. It's not what the princess does, but it's what the prince does for them that brings that happiness. So, we think often about other people's rules and then embrace that as our own. But when you come into a relationship, if you bring those rules into your relationship, it might have nothing to do with the connection that you have with your partner. So I started to think about this, and I invite you to think about, what are some of those rules that you tell yourself? I know that I came in thinking, well, men in a relationship should be doing this, and I as a woman need to be doing that. But at the end of the day, when you have a really, truly healthy relationship with your partner, nobody else's rules matter. Only the rules between you and your partner are what's most important. So being able to acknowledge and understand, even identify where those other rules are coming into play is the first step towards then pushing those other rules away and saying, no, you know what? In our relationship, we're going to create our own rules that matter to us, and we're not going to worry about other people. When we do those two steps, point number 3 is all about trusting yourself. I realized that in putting all of those artificial barriers around me as a child, I realized that I actually essentially wasn't trusting myself. I was almost gun shy to say, if that person got hurt, I don't trust myself, so I need to make sure I put up a wall around me because I don't know that I can take it, I can handle it, I don't know if I'm going to be okay. But at the end of the day, if we can learn to trust ourselves first, it becomes so much easier than to trust your partner. Because when you don't trust yourself, what you're essentially doing is projecting your insecurities onto somebody else. And so this is the critical part where if we're projecting our insecurities to somebody else, that creates the weeds in a relationship that can turn into something much more ugly in the future. So I think that if we start to look at really how can we build that trust in ourselves, that allows us in our relationship to come from a place of strength. And the place of our core strength so that we can then bring that to our partner and they can reciprocate that with us and we can have a more trusting relationship from there. And finally, rule number 4 or pillar number 4, this is our mindset and our attitude towards life, not just our relationship and ourselves, but what do we think about how we approach life? I heard at a conference once, Agape, who is Ariana Huffington's sister, she was speaking at a conference and she said, I want you to walk around with the attitude that the universe has your back. So that made me think about the fact that when I feel like I might fall, I might be drowning in something, do I believe at the end of the day that I will come out okay? Do I believe that I'm going to land on my own 2 feet? At the end of the day, I will survive and I will be stronger for it. So often when we think about something that we feel is the unknown, it's undefined for us. It's like a blackness that we can't see and it can be scary for us. But if we know that no matter what happens, we believe in ourselves and we believe that the universe will have our back and we will land on our own 2 feet, suddenly that unknowing darkness doesn't feel so scary anymore. So think about the stressors you've had in your past that might be coming in and influencing your relationship. Identify them so that you can remove them. Think about the rules that you've applied to yourself or prescribed or taking other people's rules and embracing themselves in our relationship. How are we defining our relationship based on what other people are telling us to do? And let's get those and move those away so that we in our relationships create our own rules and our own trust that works for us. Let's think about how we can trust ourselves fully first and foremost above anything else. Because when we do that, we are no longer projecting our insecurities onto other people, but we are actually passing our strength onto them. And let's all walk around knowing that the universe has our back and that we are strong enough that no matter what happens, we will always land on our own 2 feet. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and share it with anybody that you care about. If you want to be notified every time a new video comes up, then hit that little bell icon to be notified. I put up new videos every Tuesday. And finally, if you have any comments for me, please share them with me. I really want to do this journey with you together.